It was a cold, windswept afternoon when Tom Warwick decided to take a walk. The sky was crisp and clear, the sort of day where the ground would be starting to get hard and ready for snow. But according to Miver, this counted as a cold snap before winter gripped this part of Shill. Thomas spent the morning mulling over his conversation with his ladies. What Miv, Leia and Lani had to say made a lot of sense from their point of view, and looking at his life through that very different lens, a lot of memories floated to mind. So a walk had seemed like a good idea, particularly after he had asked Melondi to come along. Getting her to join him hadn't been the trick, so much as not having the whole herd of the girls tagging along. The days when he could just walk around on his own weren't gone, so much as curtailed. It wouldn't do out in town, but the academy was shutting down for Ifrovi, its walks and buildings empty of the students that turned the commons into a bustle of activity. Still, asking for a private word seemed the thing to do. The best way to know what someone was thinking was just to ask. He'd asked Mel to come out for a walk, and that was that. It was a shorter stroll than Tom had planned. A crisp day in the upper 30s was a brisk walk for him, but for a Shulvanti it bordered on pure misery. Thankfully, the little cafe on the commons was still open, and Tom closed the door behind them as Melondi hurried inside. A walk through the empty serving line later, Tom found himself sitting across from her in one of the booths, not quite feeling like he needed one of the booster seats for men. Shulvanti proportions were getting to be normal, but the booth would have easily sat 6 women, and the lack of other patrons made the room seem cavernous. It felt just as well for getting her alone, but it was one thing to talk with someone strolling beside you. It was quite another having a half-frozen girl looking at you with such apprehension. Mel, I'd like to discuss what's been bothering you. Tom turned the words over in his head as Melondi gripped her tea. It sounded formal, and maybe it was, but it was better than beating around the bush. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I meant it the way I said it. This isn't the class. You don't have to talk to me, but I'd appreciate it if you would. I'm a pretty good listener, if you'll let me. Melondi's grip on her mug grew a bit tighter, and she licked her lips hesitantly. It felt awkward, but anything else wouldn't have served. If Miv was right, opening up to him might be the last thing she wanted to do, and beating around whatever was eating at her would only have embarrassed them both. Instead, he'd made it an open invitation, and as he watched her stare into her tea, he wasn't sure if he'd opened things up or driven them apart. As the silence stretched on, he decided to try again. I learned something today, if you'd like to hear it. Sir? Melondi looked up warily, and Tom wondered if Solani had been right. Being put on a pedestal in someone else's eyes left you a long way to fall. Miver and I were talking about second chances earlier, and how rare they are for some things. It reminded me of all the times I've done one thing, when maybe I could or should have done something else, or maybe something more. Searching Melondi's face, he saw a flurry of emotions. That was better than a mask to hide her feelings, but he wasn't sure he saw comprehension either. This was turning into one of those father-daughter talks where he'd often felt useless, his words of wisdom bouncing off the armoured self-confidence of youth. Melondi was at that age where you thought you knew everything, and you'd never compromise, and for an imperial princess that could be a very real option. I've made a lot of mistakes. Tom sighed and looked down at his tea. I didn't see them as mistakes growing up, but hindsight lent you a lot of clarity. I'm not even sure that most humans would see them as mistakes, but from a Shulvanti point of view, I think they might qualify. You have a family. Melondi's brows furrowed as she tried to follow his train of thought, and Tom felt the gap of years between them. You've made a life here. You're married and you took in Desi. Most of the campus wants to be in your classes. I don't see what mistakes you're making, sir. How about you just call me Tom for Ifrovi, Or at least drop the sir. The academy rules about addressing a professor seemed counterproductive for the kind of conversation that he played out in his head. This was a lesson, sure, but it was one he could offer, not a class to teach. And I've made a lot. There have been times when I wondered if my life was just one long accumulation of regrets, like hell or the deeps are the sum of all your mistakes, and the older you get, the worse the reckoning. That's kind of awful, actually. Melondi shivered, and it was probably the cold, but the expression of distaste that flitted over her features spoke volumes. You don't really believe that, do you? Mavere told me I'd been alone too long, and looking back, I suppose she was right. Being comfortable in your own company isn't the same thing as isolation being good for you, and after the landings, I was in a bad place. I locked myself away. For a long time, I was an echo chamber for all that pain. Tom took a sip of his tea. It felt scalding after the walk outside, but that was better on a day like today. Working past that took a lot, and I think Mavere found me at just the right time. So, no, I don't feel that way, but there were times when I wondered. There are times when I just want to be Melondi. I love my mother and I have everything. She looked up, suddenly, and bit her lip. Goddess, I must sound like a spoiled brat. I have everything, but there are times when I see the other girls, and they have families. Real sisters, like Kamara and Kaslin. They don't treat each other like chess pieces. Sometimes, the more I'm here, the more I wish my other life was the fantasy. I like being Melondi. But not lately. Tom looked up to catch her eye, canting his head ever so slightly. You have all the tools to make your choices, but none of the experience. And the people around you, your friends, they don't have it either. You get experience by making mistakes, but you don't want to make mistakes. I wasn't raised to make mistakes, she said hotly, before looking away. I just wasn't. And I can't afford to either. Mel, you're more mature than most people your age. You're more mature than most adults I know. Heck, my two best friends are liberates in an apron and a notorious archaeologist with stakes in a brothel. Melondi grimaced and gave him a look. I don't know what all of that means. It means that when I came out of my echo chamber, I really came out. It means I'm very lucky, and it means I have good friends. Tom peered up with a searching look and offered her a smile. You have good friends too. You're all kind of floundering together, but you don't have to do it alone. So, you don't mind if I ask you for advice? I think Des has taken that job, but no, I don't mind. Tom smiled ruefully and blew on his tea. I like the idea of passing on sage wisdom, but I suppose my life could also serve as a warning to others. Melondi looked older than her years as she studied his face. You said you gave up on regrets. I said I stopped drowning in them. That's not the same thing as forgetting. Tom cast his mind over his regrets. For all his good fortunes, sometimes there seemed to be so many. There were 2 women in my life who I should have told, I love you. The first one, I can still see the moment I could have said it and didn't, and I still wonder what might have been. The other, well, we were friends our whole lives. I found out she died a few weeks ago. I think the love between us went without saying, but I wish I'd said it, all the same. Tom tried to swallow the sudden knot in his throat, and he saw her look away. I'll even tell you a silly one. Those don't sound silly to me. Melondi looked back, still blushing slightly. Maybe it was just consideration for him as a male, but did it really matter? Sure. Tell me a silly one. I was not much older than you are now. I was in England, and one fall day, kind of like this one, I took the train down to London. Tom looked outside, wondering if the weather had stirred the old memory. It had been a cold, crisp day. The train car wasn't very full, and a girl was sitting opposite me. I looked up and noticed she was crying. Melondi's brows arched. It was probably a Shovanti thing. Women didn't cry. Tom shrugged and pushed past it. I didn't want to embarrass her. I didn't have a hanky or anything, so I just sat there. You know, I bet no one in the whole universe remembers that moment. No one else on that train does. She probably doesn't, wherever she is. But I do, and I still regret not going over and saying, "Hi, you don't know me, but can I help?" Melondi's voice was pensive as she looked down at her hands. Is that what this conversation is? A little bit. He nodded, conceding the point. But do the motives mean the offer's worth less? Sometimes. Sometimes the motives change everything. That's fair, Tom nodded. Considering his audience, her words were probably telling. Do you think it makes a difference here and now? Melondi licked her lips, but her face was a mask as she thought it over. A long moment passed before she said, No. No, I don't think so. Thank you. She bit her lip a moment longer, then looked up. Those 2 women? Tom cocked his head to one side. I haven't said that to Vadim. Haven't said I love you to him yet. Melondi exhaled, her expression growing fitful, then angry. But that Solana Dasari? She was all over him yesterday. Ugh! I couldn't say a thing, and I just wanted to strangle her with my bare hands. I haven't told him I love him, not the way I really should. And if I say how much I mean it now, I'll just sound clingy and desperate. Maybe, but I don't think so. Tom shook his head. Vadim spoke with me about you before he ever knew you were a princess. You don't think it matters to him if the women he cares about is named Melondi or Khelira, do you? No, I don't. But aren't boys supposed to mature faster than girls? He's so... young? Inexperienced? Just like you? Trust me, short, dark, and gothic isn't the same as mature either. Tom shrugged ruefully. Part of being young is not realizing how much of life is made of these fragile instants in time, like soap bubbles or sea foam. 1 second they're there, and the next they're gone. Maybe. But maybe I notice a few of them. Melondi hesitantly reached out and took his hand. Thank you. I do feel a little better. So, you think I should just tell him how I feel? I think you can. Just don't wait too long for the right moment. Whenever you do it, it'll feel right afterward. Tom gave her hand a gentle squeeze, appreciating the moment. And hey, maybe you won't want to murder Solana Dasari. I don't know about that. She isn't much older than you. She's probably floundering too. Tom shrugged lightly. Just be the person you are. That's who Vadim cares about. And if it doesn't work, then you can bury her up to her neck in sand or something. Melondi looked up at him in horror. Ew! What? That isn't a thing? No, that's horrible. Who does that? Shill's got a lot of sand. You could have her pulled apart by Turoks. What? Humans do that? Well, we don't have Turoks. Tom shrugged, feeling a little embarrassed. Sometimes Earth's past seemed embarrassingly recent. We used to, with wild horses. You pull people apart with wild horse? Horses, not whores. Wild horses. Liam peered out of a crack in his bedroom door, watching the corridor until Belder appeared. Belle? Belle, get in here. Belder's smile was slow and easy as she stepped inside. Thought you'd never ask. It was a cheeky remark. Her expression was warm and teasing. Indulgent, even, as she closed the door and leaned back against the wall, looking at him. You look wound in. Wound up? It's wound up, and yes, you could say that. The whole night should have been a movie, and it played out in his head. Willist Chapter 2, Escape from the Dinner. It should have been a comedy, except every girl there had wanted it to be a romance. The Turoks herd was almost out on the new range to graze, and while there was still work to be done, some of the Hands and family had come in. That had made for a modest dinner crowd of just 32. Breakfast promised to be a bit larger, and Liam was feeling the need to get a grip on the situation before they got a grip on him. It wasn't fair to say they'd all been after him. 4 had been men, including Kurlak the Rakiri and his 5 wives, and Belder's Uncle Khelira, who hadn't looked at him for most of the meal. 2 more men, Franto and Leiran, had been there with their 11 wives between them. 6 had just been kids, though even the oldest girl had been giving him shy looks, with a lot more speculation than he was comfortable with, which left... well, there was Prindi, Bel's older sister, then there was Tanada and Gendry, Bel's cousins, and Yekris, Kurlak's daughter. That only left Bel's younger sister, 7 more cousins, and a small army of ranch hands coming in over the next 2 days. Come on, dinner was great. I heard you still pitched in this afternoon after we got you bandaged up. And then there was that. Learning to ride a rigoi. At least in the early stages, seemed to be nothing so much as standing next to a pen and letting the animal smell you. The whole issue of actually getting on top of it came after it decided on eating you or not. And until then it came down to some decision in its giant pink velociraptor brain about if you were a predator, prey, or something acceptably in between. 1 bite and a torn shirt later, Kurlak had offered that the rigoi, a young female named Skippy with steady parents, seemed unsure about Liam. The feeling was mutual. Sure, it had 2 rows of teeth like a great white shark. Sure, it was only a scratch that nearly sliced him open like a fillet. Kurlak hadn't been phased, so Liam held it together, got his arm bandaged, and they called it a day. The rest of the afternoon had been helping around the kitchen for dinner. And good gods almighty! Belle! Those girls are thirsty. I mean, I know they're your family, but damn! Liam knew he was venting, but making a good impression seemed like the least of his problems. Khelira and most of the other men still didn't know what to make of him, while the women knew exactly what they wanted to make of him. He shook his head and tried again. Belder, those women all wanted a piece of me, and you were sitting right there. I was almost eaten alive today. Oh, come on. Kurlak told me you were great around Skippy. Belder shrugged indifferently. It just means she likes you. I meant Tanada. Belder blushed sheepishly. Well, she likes you too. Liam looked at Belder, his friend, his love, the woman he wanted to be with, and stared. She wanted to eat me alive. Are we talking about Tananda or Skippy? Seriously? Fine. Seriously then. Liam, this is just the way most of the galaxy is. It isn't Shill, and from what I've learned, it definitely isn't Earth. Belder huffed and reached out to stroke his cheek. There are around 30 girls here who don't have a husband. All of them are going to want a shot at you, and they're going to figure at least 4 or 5 will have a real chance. That's after counting Pris, you know, and they aren't. Counting her, I mean. Liam's thoughts flickered to Pris. Slim, fit, graceful except when dancing Pris, who was probably asleep in a hotel room without an army of women around her. Liam banished the thought and focused on the present. This was real. A whole ranch of sexy purple Amazons, and his would-be fiancé thought that was normal. And it was normal for her. And... Belder's expression told him he'd been wool-gathering at least a little longer than was comfortable, and she got there first. Liam, well, it's not the fringe worlds, but Willist isn't some sector capital. This is how it is. She bit her lip, looked at him with growing apprehension. We talked about this. I really hoped you still want to make a life together? This is my home. Right now, Hope would be giving me a look. Liam knew it, and looking at Belle, it was easy to see this was one of those moments he needed to get right. It felt like walking a tightrope over hell, and one wrong word meant going over an edge. He held up a hand. Just give me a second. I don't want to mess this up. Belda nodded, but her expression grew fragile. That didn't help at all, but it mattered. She was the last person in the universe he wanted to hurt, and he knew that. Willis was her home, and yes, they discussed that too. It was just the reality sinking in, and if he wasn't up to it. No wonder the guys here don't know what to make of me. You're right, he exhaled. It was a lot to take in. A lot to take in. Tananda had looked at him like 7 feet of long legs and pure sin, and the others had all been giving him looks of expectation. Even Yankra had been sizing him up, and he'd never even considered being with a Rakiri. This was the galaxy. Every man on the ranch seemed to have 5 or 6 wives, so was he going to man up? Or hide? You're right. I guess it's just a lot of pressure. The guys here have a lot of expectations, and the women here have totally different ones. I guess I'm just trying to see where I fit in. Liam slipped his arms around Belda. I have nothing back on Earth, and I know that I only want to be where you are, and this is life in the galaxy, isn't it? And it only took you 2 planets to figure that out too? Belda's grin returned, and she reached up and mussed his hair. Saddle up, Earth boy. You're in for quite of a ride. He brushed her lock of hair back over his shoulders and held her closer. With Skippy or Tananda? A deep blush crept slowly over Belda's cheeks as she looked toward his bed. Not exactly what I had in mind. Eli McClendon knew that in life there were 3 levels of shitstorm. The first was Levi getting on his case, which usually meant Hannah too. That was no big deal. Whatever it was usually wasn't worth worrying about, and if he ignored it long enough, it always blew over to something else. The second level was Mum and Dad, and that wasn't so good. Old Pops would usually corner him for a talk, and he could say what needed to be said to smooth things over. Sometimes it even helped him see things he'd missed. You never knew what you'd get out of it. Mum being pissed off was way worse. She'd given him looks for a long time, and having her being disappointed sucked. It wasn't so bad since he'd gotten his own place, though. Give it a few days, or maybe a week, and things would blow past. A cat-free shitstorm? When Solana was pissed? That wasn't good at all. It was one thing or another having Levi or Dad act all butthurt over something, but Solana usually had his back, or was there to wait it out with. When she was pissy with him, well, it either meant that he'd really stepped in it, or that he'd won. Right now she was blowing him off, and while they hadn't actually had it out with each other, that might just be because other folks were around. Or it might not. It was hard to tell, what with everyone here and the adults all over at the Pelavon house. The weird thing was that it didn't feel like a cat-free. It sure had all the signs of one, but that didn't make much sense. The night at the type hall? Shit! Anyone could have taken a wrong turn or two, and that wasn't his fault. All the rest? Well, that was just Shorvanti being Shorvanti. What did anyone expect in a whole building full of the horny noble bitches? And that was the thing. This was Shill, not home. Friars had their visit crammed full with all the tours and museums and high-brow stuff and running around. All we had to do was play it cool for 2 weeks and make nice on the trip home. With so much going on, it'd all be forgotten. It wasn't like Levi was squeaky clean with whatever shit had happened at that park the other day. He just had to give it time and everything would be cool. Since everyone was being a tight ass, he'd migrated to the kitchen. Vadim might have been a tiny bit of a wuss, but hot damn he could cook. Plus, he was the only one in the house besides the kiddos that didn't have a stick up his ass over the tide pool, so what the hell? Besides, the twink was pretty good company, all things considered. Even if he only understood about half of what was being said in Vatica, that was good enough to get fed. Besides, it was a good idea to pig out before dinner. Word was that Phrysis was going to make her specialty. Anyone who didn't eat up now was rolling the dice instead of stacking the deck. Of course, he'd cleaned up, and word was that a couple extra folks would be coming to dinner. A few extra mouths around the table would make things easier, and he could lay low in the crowd. He sipped at his tea, missing coffee. The staff wasn't bad, but around now he'd be looking at kicking off for the day, or holding a buyers' meeting at the Garden of Eden. Either way, he'd be good to go, instead of waiting around for dinner with Phrysis. Eli looked over across the way when the door chimed, and 3 figures came in, greeting Vadim. The guy pulled out all the stops with the hospitality thing and... Fuck me! It can't be! He blinked again. He'd been pretty sure the other day about Melondi. She was a dead ringer for Miss April, but even so... Well, there were a lot of Shulvanti. But now? Fuck me running. That's Miss August, Miss January, and Miss December. There was no mistake. Sure, another girl that looked like August might have walked in, only a day or two after seeing Miss April, but twins? The January-December pics were epic. Well, in the doghouse or not, it wouldn't hurt to cast a line and see what was biting. Twins? Damn! It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and Solana would just have to get over herself. It wasn't like she hadn't rubbed his face in it by going out with Pete Dixon last summer. It was time for a little payback. Bless his little blue heart, Vadim could be counted on to offer him something to drink, but August split off toward the bathroom. Levi, Melody, and Ree were getting the kids ready. Trixis and Lagos were getting Umina together, and Solana was... probably sulking somewhere. Somebody up there really fucking likes me. Eli looked them up and down, and his smile only grew wider as the girls strolled into the kitchen for tea. They were taller than he'd imagined. At least 6'6", but damn what a climb. It wouldn't hurt to lay on the charm. Maybe set up some time for a rendezvous after dinner. Everyone would sneak away from Phrysis' cooking, and if people went their separate ways... well, tonight could work out just fine. The pair gave him a friendly smile as they walked over, and he stood up, cocked his head and put on his best grin. Evening, girls. My name's Elijah, but my friends call me Eli. Pleased to meet you. They settled down together at the counter and looked him over. I'm Kamara, one started off, as the other finished up. And I'm Kaslin. It was almost in stereo. No fucking way I'm missing this. Let's see what else you girls will be up for doing together. Eli gave him the big eyes and bit his lip, looking bashful. Shulvanti girls ate that shit up, falling all over themselves at the chance to take care of him. Yeah, right. Just a cute, lonesome boy all in need of their help. Well, the Lord help those who help themselves. I'm very glad to meet you. I've only been here a couple of days, and it's been awfully lonely being so far away from Earth and all. The pair looked at him uncertainly. He was pretty sure he was saying this right. Usually the language barrier worked in his favour, and didn't have to go too far past hello and a few minutes of enthusiastic interest. But when was he going to get these two alone again? Probably never, so he might as well just go for broke. If you ladies are free later, I'll have to, maybe, spend a little time. I'm only in town for a couple of days, and I'd love to really get to know someone here. He sighed heavily, arching his chest a little. That always stopped him cold when he was wearing a t-shirt, and the button-down he was in wouldn't have the same effect, but they get the idea. I bet you two know some great places around here to find a good time. The girls blinked and looked at one another. That was fine. 2 was better than 1, and there was no need to fight. Plenty of the old Eli to go round. He's Gaha definitely Tonsrakazaku, the one named Kazan said to her twin. The other girl grinned uncertainly, then shrugged. Definitely. You have to Gronknau Ahara, I'm for this. That sounded kind of promising, and he was definitely for it too. He cocked his head and grinned. I was hoping to find someplace to grab a drink, maybe some live music after dinner. What do you say, girls? Let's huddle over a long-time Stromy Askra night. The one named Caslin grinned. Damn, if they wanted to move fast, that suited him fine. You bet. Very long, and I've got all night. The pair broke down in giggles, and got up from the table when Miss August came out. As they strolled back over to her, the one named Khelira, or something, looked over his shoulder and rolled her eyes. Go ravek fuck. Rigroiveke. Yep. I'm ready to go. This is gonna be a good... Snit! Eli looked over at the hall as Hannah broke down in a fit of laughter. She met his eyes as he spotted her. She paused long enough to fall against one wall before she broke down giggling. What? Eli scowled, but kept his voice down. Alright, so what's so damn funny? Hannah wiped a tear from her eyes and shook her head. You didn't get a single word of that, did you? I got enough. Hannah looked ready to break into another fit of the giggles, and suspicion gripped him for a moment. Didn't I? Oh no. Hannah shook her head ever so slightly and pursed her lips. As she walked into the kitchen, she looked ready to break down again. No, you definitely didn't. And you won't be getting anything else. Eli felt his blood rising, as anger and embarrassment fought to see which would come out on top. What? What the hell do they say? Well, it sounds like you bounced off an ex, because they're both pretty certain you aren't fit to tie the shoes of some guy named Aku. Hannah shook her head, with that look she got when he'd fucked up. Not the kind where she was disappointed. It was more the keep it up so I can point and laugh look. Eli took a breath and tried to get hold of his temper, but it wasn't easy. He wasn't ready to give up. Not when the calendar twins were on the line. Maybe she was even making it up just to spite him. What about that bit about going for a ride later? Didn't sound like I got it too wrong, to me. You really need to work on your verbs and tenses. Hannah nearly burst out again, but choked it off. They said it in the imperative. Didn't you get that bit about riding? About to go riding like, Rigaviake or something? Oh god, you are so clueless. Didn't you ever watch Marlin Perkins? It's pronounced Rigoivake. Sort of a gelded Rigoi, you know? Having grown up on the farm, Eli knew exactly what was implied by the word gelded, and her starting to snicker again sealed the deal. So like no, not like. Use the single-person imperative tense with to go, remember? Hannah looked like Mum did whenever she thought something went in one ear and out the other. Hannah shook her head and gave an airy wave like it was useless. She basically said, go fuck yourself, jackass. Nice. Well, one thing I do know for sure. It's not like you're gonna get any action around here. Eli felt the blood rise to his cheeks and he clenched his fists. And what are you? Spouting me for Mum and Dad? Spare me. You bomb so badly they'll see that crater from orbit. Hannah shook her head and picked out a mug, pouring some water. Why don't you go do something useful for a change and give Levi a hand with the kids so we'll be on time? Fuck off. Anyway, running around after Levi and the rest is your job, Eli snarled, putting a little bite in it. His little sister had a thing about what she did for a living. It was a sore spot for her, living at home and not going off to school. Should have figured you for a snitch. Sucking out to the others is all you do, and it's all you're ever gonna be. They were fighting words, and he usually saved that kind of thing for when Hannah was fighting dirty. She was old enough to talk a big game, but not tough enough to fight back, if the chips were down. He had his own life, his own place, his own girls. Who the hell was she to laugh at him? So damn sure of yourself, as usual. She gave him a long, cool look up and down, her eyes lingering on his fists before she shook her head. "You know, I wouldn't be too sure about that. Not any of it." "Yeah? What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I got a job offer. So go raveke fuck, rigoivake." Hannah brushed past him on the way out to the living room. "There! Did you understand it that time?" Khelira looked out as the dark of night passed beyond her motorcade, thinking back on the evening. Camordry slid into her seat after waiting on Laurel and smiled warmly. "Well, but thank you for accepting the invitation. I don't get to dine in private company often enough, and the chef has laid in something special." Laurel's wife, the Duchess Trinia, had nodded. "It's our pleasure, Princess. My husband and I were saying how much we looked forward to it on the drive here. I'm told you have a wonderful chef. For normal events." Khelira smiled on the memory. Camordry had coloured slightly at the barb, but after a moment she bowed her head, choosing to gloss over things and accept it as a compliment. "I'm told you've been rather deeply in the restaurant business yourself, Khelira. How, but dabbling here and there?" "I've been enjoying my time before coming out in public." She'd felt herself blushing, but didn't rise to it. There was no doubt she was hinting around about Vadim. She was about to say more when they were all interrupted by the waiter. "Why, but the spiced turox is excellent!" Camordry enthused, if only briefly. "So we heard." Laurel nodded to the waiter. "I'll have that, of course. And a white chalice, I think." "We shouldn't stand on formalities, since it's just family." Trinia smiled before glancing at the waiter. "I'll have the same." She'd ordered the steak, but with a blue grail. It was a common drink, and the others had smiled at her choice. On the other hand, it arrived unopened, and she could drink at her own pace. She determined before the night began that would be very little. "It's a very nice dining room." "How, but this little thing?" Camordry waved a hand at the room. It could comfortably seat 8, and was tastefully panelled in half a dozen kinds of exotic hardwoods laid in a pattern that spiraled subtly up the walls. "Well, but I believe it was laid by Princess Leary over 200 years ago." Laurel and Trinia nodded, and she had as well, as if they'd all known all along. It might or might not be right, but it only mattered insofar as Camordry establishing herself as mistress of her domain. Trinia sipped her drink after it was poured, considering it. "Your knowledge is fascinating, and so is your discretion." Trinia swelled the cup, considering. Some women wouldn't be satisfied here. They'd be tempted to change things, to try and expand out or try an extension. But why? It's perfect as it is. The jab about Vadim still stung, and Khelira chose her moment. "You know, you're right, Trinia. I bet that if you changed the room, everyone would frown on it. Why, I'd wager that it would probably never be used again." Camordry sat and listened, sipping her own drink, a smile playing over her lips. As everyone waited to be served, it was clear they all understood one another. "What can one say? As much as we all deplore the deaths of Aurelea and poor Satora, one has one's parts to play." Camordry lowered her glass as the meal was served. She settled back, counting her head. "And how? Am I not to do my part? Ever since we returned. But for you, of course, Khelira. I've been ever so busy. I've been readying the commencement speech for tomorrow night and countless other details. The family has an image to maintain. Well, the adults, certainly. I should check these trivial details with you both, I know. One does apologize." She'd nodded at the time. In truth, she'd arrived for the evening unsure of what she'd expected, but this was not it. Trinia had all but claimed that Camordry was getting above herself, but Camordry had claimed that she was the innocent. Should she have believed it or called her sister on it? Even more to the point had been the issue of letting Camordry get away with it. "I send my condolences about Aurelea and Satora," she said, looking to her brother and his wife. "You must have had them when you landed, but
I wanted to say it in person.
Camordri opened her mouth, then closed it, as if she hadn't been expecting the tangent. After a moment, she nodded. One can't help but sympathize. It's all been such a trial for you both, we're sure. One wanted to extend one's condolences personally.
Turok shit. You forgot.
No one spoke as they ate. That was just as well. But everyone was following their training. It wasn't dinner. It was like chess, and not talking gave you more time to consider everything in play. What did Camordri want? What did Loral and his wife want? What assets did she have to stop either of them? Were they all waiting for Mother, the Empress, to return? If it came down to an open confrontation, should she use what she had, or bow out and try to play for time? Wouldn't that give them time to prepare as well? Both of them? They'd been away from Shield, but they both had more assets at their discretion. Any way she looked at it, they were already more prepared than she was. Everyone had ended their meal around the same moment, setting aside their cutlery. They'd all regarded each other. She'd looked at her family, and more than looked, she saw. Camordri was the eldest daughter, at home in her palace, and despite her affectations, she was extending the proper courtesies that events called for. Loral and Trinia were the grief-stricken couple, bravely working through their difficulties, and ready to do their part for the Imperium and the family despite their losses. That was when she'd known.
I think that it would be best if my seat were behind yours during the address, she had said, topping up her glass, to show who is more prominent. Everyone usually hears Mother and already knows who is who, but it might be nice as a nod to the situation.
Camordri smiled, delighted.
Why? But one hasn't even considered such a visual impact to the common people. Done! Of course. It's only right for Loral to do the same, Trinia said agreeably. If the evening works out, there's no reason we can't all work together and further the impression of the family in the minds of the people, to show our stability after such troubling times. It's Ifrovi, after all. Loral and I understand the need for simple comforts more than anyone.
Oh, but absolutely. Camordri raised her glass in salute to her guests.
Absolutely?
With nothing to add, she'd raised her glass.
To the family.
Just beyond, in the dead of night, 4 pods of her personal death heads were riding as escorts. Agent Davari had assured her more than once that air traffic control was being very vigilant. The evening was over with, only the events ahead to ponder. Matters like dealing with Vadim and his family while she sat through the commencement address. It was a short speech, and perhaps she could make amends the day after. At least, she tried to. It was Ifrovi, after all. As her limousine sped back toward the capital, and the comforting safety of the academy, Khelira wondered who of her family would still be alive in a year.